Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Today we will be talking about hepatitis B, its diagnosis, its treatment, and its prevention. The initial assessment of any patient with hepatitis B consists of three important aspects. Number one is assessment of liver disease activity and severity, because this is one of the important parameter as indication for starting the treatment. Then the various markers of hepatitis B infections to make a diagnosis of stage of the hepatitis B infection. And number three, screening of all the first degree relatives and the sexual partners of hepatitis B virus for the presence of serological markers, and if indicated, their vaccination. The assessment of severity of liver disease is important, number one, for the purpose of treatment, and number two, for the surveillance of hepatocellular carcinoma. This assessment is based on a thorough physical examination and the laboratory investigations consisting of the biochemical parameters including LFTs, complete blood count, and the coagulation profile in the form of prothrombin time and APTT. The abdominal ultrasound will help in finding out the size of the liver, the texture of the liver, the presence of portal hypertension, the splenomegaly, and other features of advanced liver disease. Then liver biopsy or the non-invasive test where the hepatitis B biomarker markers, they are inconclusive, and they will be helpful in finding out the underlying disease activity and stage of inflammation. Then another alternative to the liver biopsy is the assessment of liver stiffness by means of the fibroscans, which are done either by the transient elastography or by the shear wave elastography. Then similarly, various serum biomarkers will be also helpful as a non-invasive test to find out the histological activity and the stage of inflammation. And remember, the diagnostic accuracy of these non-invasive tests and these serum biomarkers is better at excluding rather than confirming the advanced fibrosis or cirrhosis. At the same time, the patient should also be worked up for the underlying comorbidities, including alcoholic, the autoimmune, and metabolic liver disease with the presence of steatosis or steatohepatitis, and other causes of chronic liver disease should also be systematically excluded. At the same time, one should also exclude co-infection with other important viruses like hepatitis C virus, hepatitis delta virus, and HIV. The various serological and virological markers of hepatitis B. We know the hepatitis B consists of a partially double-stranded DNA with negative and the positive strands, and the estimation of the DNA level is important feature of underlying replicative status of the virus, and this is must to find out the quantitative level of the DNA, because the threshold level for the treatment according to the most of the guidelines is when the level is more than 2000 intrathecal per liter. The other antigen antibody systems which are used for biochemical markers, they include the surface antigen and surface antibodies, the core antibodies IgM and IgG types, and then the E antigen and E antibodies. The three important systems which are used to categorize the stage of the disease and various biomarkers they include the surface antigen and the surface antibodies, the E antigen and E antibodies, and as the core antigen it does not appear in the blood, so core antibodies either total or IgM, and each serological marker has its own clinical significance. The surface antigen. After the person is infected, the first marker to appear in the blood at the completion of incubation period, usually within 1 to 12 weeks, is the surface antigen. The circulating surface antigen, it precedes the elevation of serum aminotransferase activity and clinical symptoms by 2 to 6 weeks, and it remains detectable during the entire symptomatic and icteric phase of the disease, and in typical cases the surface antigen becomes undetectable 1 to 2 months after the onset of jaundice, and it really persists beyond 6 months. It is the persistence of surface antigen beyond 6 months when we label this patient as progressing to the chronic hepatitis. The demarcation between acute hepatitis and chronic hepatitis is 6 months, and after the surface antigen disappears, then the antibody to surface antigen, they make their appearance in the blood and they remain undetectable indefinitely thereafter. And this is the course of a self-limited case of the hepatitis B virus. So the surface antibodies, they only appear in the blood once the surface antigen has disappeared, and then there is a window period of few weeks. And before the surface antigen disappears, the E antigen also has disappeared. So the presence of surface antibodies in the blood indicate that this patient has made complete recovery from all the antigens in the blood. And number 2, this is a protective type of antibodies, and the presence of surface antibody means that this patient is protected against the future attacks of hepatitis B. And number 3, because surface antibodies will only appear when all the markers they have disappeared, so this patient is not going to progress to chronicity or to the other complications related with the chronic liver disease. The other important biomarkers is the presence of antibodies against the core antigen, the IgM, IgG, and the total core antibodies. The anti-hepatitis B core of IgM class, they predominate during the first 6 months after the acute infections, where the IgG type of core antibodies is the predominant class of antibodies beyond 6 months. Therefore, patients with current or recent acute hepatitis B, they have IgM anti-core antibodies, and patients who have recovered from hepatitis B, and as well as those patients who have chronic hepatitis B virus infections, the anti-hepatitis B core predominantly of IgG class will be in the blood. Sometimes in 1 to 5% of the patients with acute hepatitis B virus infections, the level of surface antigen, they are too low to be detected in the blood. So in such cases, the diagnosis of acute hepatitis B is made by the presence of IgM core antibodies. And generally in persons who have recovered from hepatitis B, the surface antibodies and the core antibodies, they persist indefinitely in the blood. The third important marker is the presence of E antigen. This E antigen appears in the blood concomitantly or shortly after the appearance of the surface antigen, and its appearance coincides temporarily with high levels of virus replication, and it reflects the presence of circulating intact virions and detectable hepatitis B DNA virus. But sometimes there is a mutation which is known as pre-core mutations, and these patients with these pre-core mutations, they fail to secrete E antigens. So these patients, they won't have E antigen in their blood, and they are labeled as E antigen negative patients. In self-limited hepatitis B virus infections, this E antigen becomes undetectable shortly after the peak elevation in the level of aminotransferases and before the disappearance of surface antigen. And then the core antibodies against E antigen, they become detectable and they are coinciding with period of relatively low infectivity. Another important marker is the estimation of hepatitis DNA levels. The presence of the DNA, it shows active replication of the virus, and this is one of the important prerequisites when you are considering the indication for the treatment. So quantitative estimation of the DNA level is essential in every patient of hepatitis B, and the threshold level, according to most of the guidelines where one has to start treatment, is 2000 international units per milliliter of the blood. Sometimes the patient is stable in the non-replicative phase where all the markers, they are silent, and sometimes this non-replicative hepatitis B virus infection can convert back to its replication infections. Such spontaneous reactivations, they are accompanied by re-expression of the E antigen and re-expression of hepatitis B virus DNA, and sometimes the appearance of IgM type of core antibodies and plus exacerbation of the underlying liver injury. So this table shows the pattern of biochemical markers in a patient with acute hepatitis B virus infections. The surface antigen will be positive and obviously surface antibody will be negative. The E antigen will be positive and there will be no E antibodies, and the core antibodies, the total will be positive and IgM type of core antibody will be detected, and hepatitis B virus DNA level will also be positive. Patient with chronic hepatitis B virus infections who is E antigen positive, obviously the surface antigen will be positive and surface antibody will be negative. The E antigen will be positive and the E antibodies, they still are negative, and the core antibodies total, they are positive. And now the IgM type of core antibodies, they may be positive or negative depending upon the duration of the illness, and DNA level, they will be positive. And this is the pattern of biochemical markers in a patient who is non-active and healthy carrier. The surface antigen will be positive, so there will be no surface antibodies. The E antigen, they have disappeared. The E antibodies, still they have not made their appearance. The total core antibodies obviously will be present, but now the core antibodies of IgM, they have disappeared, and obviously the DNA level will be undetectable. And if the patient has got vaccination, then only one marker will be positive, and that is the surface antibodies. All other markers will be negative, and if you see this pattern, this indicates the previous vaccination of this patient. So this is the diagram showing the correlation between the various markers and the clinical features of a patient. The surface antigen, they will be positive. Initially the E antigen will also be positive, and the DNA level will be seen, and after the appearance of these antigens, the patient shows features of hepatitis, and if this patient is going to recover, the surface antigen will disappear within 6 months, and before the surface antigen disappears, the E antigen also disappears, and the DNA level, they also disappear. And then you get the formation of surface antibodies after a window period of few weeks, and the core antibodies, they initially of IgM type, and later on they are replaced by the IgG type of core antibodies. And this is the pattern of biochemical markers in a patient who has progressed to the stage of chronic carrier state. The surface antigen, they will appear at the end of incubation period, and they will persist indefinitely after 6 months. Similarly, E antigen will also persist, and later on they may disappear. The E antigen level, the DNA level, they also persist in this patient, and as the surface antigen is not disappearing, so the surface antibodies will not make their appearance in the blood, and the core antibodies, they initially of IgM type, and later on they are replaced by the IgG type. And this is the pattern of various markers and the ALT activity and the clinical features. And coming to treatment, there are 3 major guidelines to suggest the treatment of hepatitis B infections, and most of the treatment is according to these 3 guidelines. The latest are the American Association of Study of Liver Disease Practice Guidelines, published in 2018. Then we had this European Association of Study of Liver Disease Guidelines 2017, and relatively old Asia Pacific Association for Study of Liver Disease Guidelines 2015. And before we go to the indications and the actual strategies for the treatment, there are few facts to be kept in mind regarding hepatitis B virus. Number 1, this is a DNA virus, and it incorporates itself into the DNA of the human liver cells, and it persists in the form of the closely covalent circular DNA. So it is not possible to completely eradicate the virus from the body cells. You can only suppress the replication of the DNA. So if patient already has got low replicative status, then there is no need to treat these patients. And the goal of treatment of chronic hepatitis B is to suppress the hepatitis DNA level to undetectable levels, because you cannot completely eradicate the virus, so you have to maintain a suppression of the DNA level to a threshold which is undetectable. The second important goal is to normalize the ALT and AST, and they indicate underlying immune activation. Similarly, the control of immune activity will also show improvement in the liver histology. The optimum goal should be the loss of surface antigen, but that target is not achieved in most of the patients, even with treatment either with nucleoside or nucleotide analogs or with pegylated interferon. So the secondary goal is to get conversion of E antigen and its replacement by the E antibodies. Similarly, the reduction in the clinical progression and progression to hepatic decompensation and death is another important goal of treatment. So the main goal of therapy in patients with chronic hepatitis B virus infection is to improve the survival and quality of life by preventing the disease progression. Another goal is to prevent the mother-to-child transmission, and that is the major route of transmission in the areas of high endemic prevalence. Another important goal is to prevent the hepatitis B virus reactivations whenever these patients they are subjected to immunosuppressive drugs, and if patient has got co-infection with hepatitis C virus, then the treatment with directly acting antivirals can also cause spontaneous reactivation of this hepatitis B virus, and one has to consider prevention of this reactivation. Another important goal is to treat the extrahepatic manifestations which are associated with hepatitis B, and two major extrahepatic manifestations. Number one is the polyarteritis nodosa, and the second one is the renal disease, which can present in the form of nephrotic syndrome or nephritic syndrome. And then regression of fibrosis and cirrhosis is another important goal. The likelihood of achieving these goals depends upon, number one, the timing of therapy during the natural course of infections. Remember, the patient with the underlying hepatitis, they will only respond to treatment. So simple stage of infection will not be responding to treatment. Similarly, stage of the disease where you start the treatment is important, and patient's age when the treatment is started is also important. Another important association of hepatitis B virus is with hepatocellular carcinoma. Sometimes the first presentation is with hepatocellular carcinoma, but most of the time the hepatocellular carcinoma occurs on the background of chronic liver disease, and even the treatment with the nucleotide analog or pegylated interferon does not completely reduce the chances of getting hepatocellular carcinoma. So any patient with hepatocellular carcinoma who is started on treatment, the main goal is to suppress the hepatitis B virus replications, to induce the stabilization of liver disease, and to prevent the disease progression. And the second important goal is to reduce the risk of hepatocellular carcinoma recurrence after potentially curative therapies. In cases of acute hepatitis B, the main goal of treatment is to prevent the risk of acute or subacute liver failure. Similarly, improving the quality of life by shortening the duration of the disease associated symptoms. And third important goal is to lower the risk of chronicity. The various options which are available for the treatment of hepatitis B infections, they include, number one, the pegylated interferon, which is given once weekly for 48 weeks, and then the oral drugs, either the nucleotide or the nucleoside analogs, and all of them they are the inhibitors of reverse transcriptase. And total 6 options are available: the lamivudine, adafovir, talbivudine, and entecavir, and then tenofovir. Its 2 forms: the tenofovir disoproxil fumarate, which is abbreviated as TDF, and the latest molecule is the tenofovir alafenamide, which was FDA approved in 2017, and that is TAF. The indications for the treatment is based on the combination of 3 criteria. Number 1 is the level of the serum DNA. Number 2, the levels of the ALT, and number 3, the severity of liver disease. Remember 2 important facts about hepatitis B, and they are helpful in finding out the indications for the hepatitis B infections. Number 1, you cannot completely eradicate the virus, and you can only suppress the replication of the virus. So if the patient already has got low replication status, then there is no need to treatment. Most of the studies and most of the guidelines, they indicate that liver disease is minimum when the level of the DNA in the blood is less than 2000 international unit per milliliter. So if patient already has got a level of DNA below 2000 international unit, then patient already has got low replicative status, and this patient does not need treatment. And number two, neither antiviral drugs nor immunomodulatory drugs, they are capable of controlling the infections and the virus until body's immune system is also activated. So in the absence of any immune activation, there will be no success of the treatment with any of the drugs. So one has to demonstrate the presence of underlying immune activity in all the patients of acute and patients of hepatitis B before you start treatment. And two main indicators of underlying immune activity is the level of ALT. So ALT level should be at least 2 times the upper limit of normal before you consider this patient as treatment. And the second important feature of underlying immune activity is the severity of liver disease, and there should be moderate type of disease activity and inflammation assessed either on the basis of non-invasive markers or liver biopsy before you consider the treatment. So combination of these three components, the level of the DNA, the level of ALT and severity of liver disease, is considered to make indications for the treatment. If all these three are present, this is a clear-cut indication of treatment, and this patient should always be treated. And if out of 3, 2 are present, then these patients, it may be considered for the treatment on individual basis. So main indication for the treatment are all the patients who are E antigen positive or E antigen negative, and they are in the stage of chronic hepatitis. If the DNA level is more than 2000, if the level of DNA is more than 2000 units per milliliter, so the DNA level of more than 2000 international units, ALT at least 2 times the upper limit of normal, and there should be at least a moderate to severe liver necroinflammation, and this becomes a clear-cut indication for the treatment. Patients with compensated or decompensated cirrhosis need treatment, and here the level of DNA is not important. With any detectable level of DNA and patient is having advanced liver disease, he should be treated, and this treatment is for indefinite period. He has to continue this antiviral treatment throughout his life. And similarly, if the patient has got the DNA level of more than 2000 units and ALT is more than 2 times the upper limit of normal, so out of these 3, now 2 criteria are met, so this patient should also be started treatment regardless of degree of fibrosis. And those patients who have got E antigen positive chronic hepatitis B virus infections, which is defined by persistently normal ALT level and high DNA level, and they may be treated if they are older than 30 years. Now we have only 2 indications, so you have to make treatment decision on individual basis. And similarly, patients who are E antigen positive or E antigen negative and chronic hepatitis B, and they have a family history of hepatocellular carcinoma or family history of cirrhosis, and they also have extrahepatic manifestations, they should be treated even if the typical treatment indications they are not fulfilled. And there are two main treatment strategies. One is the use of oral drugs, the nucleoside and nucleotide analogs, and the second option is to use the pegylated interferon alpha. The 6 oral drugs which are FDA approved and available for the treatment, and they include the drugs with low barrier to resistance, and they are lamivudine, adefovir and telbivudine, and these drugs, they are not used as first line drugs anymore. And then you have 3 other drugs which have a high barrier to resistance, and they are the drug to be used as a first choice: the entecavir and tenofovir, either its disoproxil fumarate form or its alafenamide form. So the nucleotide analogs and nucleoside analogs with low barrier against resistance like lamivudine, adefovir and telbivudine, and they are not the drug of choice anymore. And then the drugs with high barrier against resistance like entecavir, TDF and TDF, they are the drugs of the first choice. These oral drugs, they have got number of advantages. Their therapeutic efficacy is predictable, it is high, and they have a long-term antiviral efficacy, and they lead to undetectable DNA levels in vast majority of the compliant patients. They are safe drugs, and they also have a favorable safety profile, and usually there are no contraindications. They can safely be used in any hepatitis B virus patients, and they represent the only treatment, because in these situations the pegylated interferon cannot be used, so the oral drugs, they are the only options. Like patients with decompensated liver disease where the pegylated interferon is contraindicated. Similarly, patients after liver transplant, they can only be treated with oral drugs. Patients with extrahepatic manifestations, they can only be treated with oral drugs. And similarly, if you make a decision to start treatment with acute hepatitis B, the only option is these oral drugs. And if you have the severe reactivation and exacerbation of chronic hepatitis B, then the only choice is the treatment with oral drugs. And these drugs, they are only option for prevention of reactivations in those patients who are undergoing immunosuppression. And similarly, the prevention of hepatitis B transmission in patients with high viremic load, and these patients, they are not fulfilling the typical criteria for treatment, the only option is to start with the oral drugs. Like the patients who is pregnant and has got high viral load, one can start the oral drug in the last trimester to minimize the risk of vertical transmission. The second option is to use pegylated interferon alpha, and this induces a long-term immunological control with a definite duration of treatment. This is the only option where you have the definite duration of treatment of 48 weeks. With the oral drug, the treatment usually is not limited to any particular duration, and sometimes it has to be for 3-4 years, and sometimes even lifelong treatment is indicated. But the response to the treatment is highly variable, and there are a number of side effects which are associated with this pegylated interferon. So the safety profile is unfavorable, and you can also have early stopping rules for this pegylated interferon treatment. For a patient who is naive to treatment, the long-term administration of a potent nucleotide or nucleoside analog with a high barrier to resistance is the treatment of choice, and this is regardless of the severity of liver disease. The preferred regimes are to use entecavir and tenofovir fumarate or tenofovir alafenamide as monotherapies. The lamivudine, adafovir and telbivudines, they are no longer recommended as the drug of the first choice. The choice is usually between the entecavir or between the tenofovir. Both of them, they are safe drug, but the use of tenofovir is associated with decrease in bone mineral density and also is associated with renal involvement. So you will be preferring entecavir over the TDF if the patient is more than 60 years of age, he has got underlying bone disease, or patient is on chronic steroid use, or patient is using some other medications which will worsen the bone density. There is history of fragility fractures and there is evidence of osteoporosis. So in all these settings, the first choice will be using the entecavir. And similarly, if the patient shows evidence of kidney involvement with the estimated GFR of less than 60 milliliter per minute, patient is having albuminuria of more than 30 milligram, and patient shows evidence of moderate proteinuria on dipsticks testing, the phosphate level is low, less than 2.5 milligram per deciliter, or patient is on hemodialysis. Again, in the presence of these renal alterations, the drug of choice is entecavir. And the latest version is the tenofovir alafenamide, which is basically a prodrug, and it has more stable pharmacokinetic and pharmacodynamic profile, and it is used in a relatively smaller dose of 25 milligram as compared to 300 milligram with the fumarate. And this tenofovir alafenamide, it should be preferred to entecavir in patients who have previous exposure to the nucleotide analogs or nucleoside analogs, and especially if the patient was treated with lamivudine. The entecavir, although it is a safe drug, but its dose, it also needs to be adjusted if the GFR is less than 50 milliliter per 24 hours, and no dose adjustment of the alafenamide is required in adults or adolescents with estimated creatine clearance greater than or equal to 15 milliliter per minute, or in patient with creatine clearance of less than 15 milliliter per minute and on hemodialysis. We usually use monotherapy either with one of the drugs or with the pegylated interferon, and about the option of combination treatment. The de novo combination therapy with the two nucleotide or nucleoside analogs and with high barrier to resistance is not recommended, because then there is no extra advantage of combining these two drugs. In treatment adherent patients with incomplete suppression of hepatitis B virus replications reaching to plateau during the either entecavir or tenofovir long-term therapy, one can consider a switchover to other drug, or combining both drugs, it may be considered. And de novo combination of the nucleoside analog and pegylated interferon alpha is not recommended. And in treatment naive surface antigen positive patients, a short-term pre-treatment with a nucleotide analog before the pegylated interferon is not recommended. And in long-term nucleotide suppressed chronic hepatitis B patients, adding or switching to pegylated interferon is again not recommended. So for all practical purposes, the combination treatment is not recommended. One can only switch to other drug if the effect is not desirable. Another important consideration is to consider the association of pregnancy and hepatitis B. It is recommended that every patient during her first trimester should be investigated and screened for the presence of surface antigen. In a woman without any advanced fibrosis who plan a pregnancy in the near future, it may be prudent to delay the therapy until the child is born. So if the patient has got no advanced liver disease and she is planning to become pregnant, she may be allowed to complete her pregnancy, and after the completion of pregnancy, then the option of treatment may be considered. And the pregnant woman with chronic hepatitis B and advanced fibrosis or cirrhosis, treatment with tenofovir is recommended. The safe drugs to be used during pregnancy, they are lamivudine, telviudine and tenofovir. So if the patient has got a very high viral load, it is more than 200,000 international units per milliliter, then the risk of vertical transmission is very high. So these patients may be started with the tenofovir starting with the 30 week of pregnancy, and one can carry on this treatment 12 weeks after the completion of the pregnancy to minimize the risk of vertical transmission. And the other indications for starting the tenofovir treatment during pregnancy, if the surface antigen level is again very high and it is more than 4 log international unit per milliliter. If the patient already is on some other nucleotide analogs and patient becomes pregnant, then it is better to switch to the tenofovir because this is the safe options, and entecavir should be discontinued and it should be replaced with the tenofovir. Moreover, at the time of delivery, the active and passive immunization should be offered to the child, to the newborn baby, to minimize the risk of vertical transmissions and perinatal transmissions. Otherwise, in the absence of this prophylaxis, 90 to 95% of the newborn babies, they will get infections and they will become chronic carriers. The passive immunization is with the immunoglobulin 0.06 milliliter per kilogram body weight, preferably given within 12 hours, and at the same time the routine schedule of vaccination is also started. And patient who is being treated with tenofovir, the breastfeeding is not contraindicated. One can continue with the breastfeeding even in the presence of the treatment with tenofovir. Another important consideration is the co-infection with hepatitis C virus, and a significant number of patients, they are co-infected with the hepatitis C and hepatitis B co-infections. The option for treating hepatitis C virus infections is now with the directly acting antivirals, and one of the potential side effects of these directly acting antiviral is they can cause reactivation of hepatitis B virus. So patients who are fulfilling the standard criteria for hepatitis B virus treatment, they should receive the nucleoside analog treatment. Patients who are surface antigen positive and they are undergoing directly acting antiviral therapy, they should be considered for concomitant prophylaxis until week 12 post DA treatment, and they should be monitored closely to minimize the risk of reactivations. And patients who are surface antigen negative and core antibody positive and they are undergoing treatment with directly antivirals, they should be monitored and treated for hepatitis B virus reactivation in case if there is ALT elevation. And coming to the aspect of prophylaxis, two types of prophylaxis they are available: the passive immunizations by the use of the immunoglobulins, and the active immunization by the use of hepatitis B vaccine. The first vaccine for active immunizations was introduced in 1982, and this vaccine was purified surface antigen which was derived from the plasma of healthy surface antigen carriers. In 1987, the plasma-derived vaccine was replaced by the genetically engineered vaccine, and this genetically engineered vaccine consists of surface antigen particles which are non-glycosylated, but they otherwise are indistinguishable from the natural surface antigen. Until now, two recombinant vaccines they were available, and recently, and these are basically the monovalent type of vaccines, and recently a trivalent type of vaccine is also available, and it has shown a considerable promise over the monovalent vaccines, and it is more immunogenic. And in those immunocompromised patients where the conventional monovalent vaccines they are not very immunogenic, this trivalent vaccine has shown considerable efficacy. Routinely, these two available vaccines they are given a course of 3 injections, and the doses depending upon the preparation are the 10 microgram or 20 microgram. And now we have also the combination of hepatitis B vaccine with other childhood vaccines. These hepatitis B vaccines they are used for pre-exposure and for post-exposure prophylaxis, and the vaccine schedule is 3 injections, and they should be given preferably in the deltoid and not in the gluteal regions, because the immune reaction is significantly high when the injection is given in the deltoid regions. And usual routine is to give 3 injections at 0, 1 and 6 months, but other options are available where one can give injections at 0, 1, 2 and 12 months, or at the 0 week, then first week, then 3 weeks, and then the 4th injection is given at 12 months. And the B vaccine is recommended for all the newborns and then children and adolescents who are not vaccinated at birth, then anyone who has a sexually transmitted infections including the HIV, then the healthcare workers, the emergency workers and other people who come in contact with the blood, they should also be vaccinated. The high risk men who have sex with men, they should also be vaccinated. People with multiple sex partners, people with chronic liver disease, and people who have intravenous drug abuse behavior, they should also be vaccinated. And similarly, the sexual partners of someone who has hepatitis B should also be vaccinated. And the travelers who are planning to go to endemic areas of the world with high hepatitis B infections, they should also get vaccinated. And the passive immunization is with the immunoglobulin, which is used for the post-exposure prophylaxis to provide passive immunizations. And patients who experience a direct percutaneous inoculation or a transmucosal exposure to surface antigen positive blood, like accidental needle stick injuries or other mucosal penetrations or ingestions, then a single intramuscular dose of these immunoglobulin 0.06 milliliter per kilogram body weight is administered as soon as possible, preferably within 12 hours, but they can be given up to 1 week. And this injection of immunoglobulin is followed by a complete course of hepatitis B vaccine to begin with in the first week. And for those who are exposed by sexual contact to a patient with acute hepatitis B, then again a single intramuscular dose of these immunoglobulins 0.06 milliliter per kilogram should be given within 14 days of exposure, and this is to be followed by a complete course of hepatitis B vaccine. When both immunoglobulin and hepatitis B vaccines they are recommended, they may be given at the same time, but they should be given at the separate site. So one arm can be used for giving immunoglobulin injections, and the other arm can be used for giving the first shot of the vaccines. So thank you very much for